Hey guys, today we are diving into Flexbox. You will be learning the main and cross axes, flex direction, justify content, align items, and much more. Let's get into it. To use Flexbox, we need two things: a flex container and flex items inside the container. To use Flexbox, you must first target the container and give the container a property of display and value of flex. In this example, a div with the class of container is the parent, wrapping three child divs with the class of item. The container has been given a width and height of 500 pixels and a border of 2 pixels solid black. Each item has been given the height and width of 100 pixels and a different color. Now observe what happens when the parent container has the property display flex. Now that display flex has been applied to the parent container, we are telling the browser that this container is a Flexbox container and it is using Flexbox rules. But what happens next? How does Flexbox decide where and how to place your items? That's where two key concepts come in: the main axes and the cross axes. The main axis is the direction in which your flex items are laid out. By default, this is horizontal, so your items will sit in a row, side by side. The cross axis is the opposite. It's vertical. It controls how your items are aligned up and down. For example, if your main axis is horizontal, all your items display in a row, but you can use Flexbox properties on the container to adjust how they align vertically along the cross axes. Now, what if you want your items to stack instead of sit in a row? Easy! You can change the main axes to be vertical using the flex direction property. When you do this, the cross axis flips too, becoming horizontal instead of vertical. Understanding the main and cross axes is so important because Flexbox properties like alignment and spacing depend on them. But don't worry, we'll break it all down step by step. Next up, flex direction. Now that we understand the main and cross axes, let's talk about how to control them using the flex direction property. This property is like the steering wheel of Flexbox. It lets you decide how your items are arranged inside the container. By default, Flexbox uses flex direction row. This means the main axis is horizontal, so your items will sit in a row from left to right. Need to reverse the order? Use flex direction row reverse. The main axis is still horizontal, but the items start from the right and move to the left. Want your items to stack? Set flex direction column. This makes the main axis vertical, so your items are arranged from top to bottom. The cross axis becomes horizontal. And if you want them to stack in reverse order, use flex direction column reverse. Now the items start from the bottom and move to the top. Let's now have a look at the flex direction property in action. In the HTML, we have a parent container surrounding three items, as you can see on the right here. Now, to make this a Flexbox container, we give the container a display of flex. If we save that, all the items are displayed in a row. We can now change the direction of the items using the flex direction property. Let's do that now. So flex direction, column. Now if we save that, the items now line up vertically. If we want the items to start from the bottom and go up, we can do column reverse. Save that, and they start from the bottom. We can also do row reverse. starting from the right, going in, and row, which is the default. Flex direction is super powerful and gives you complete control over how items are arranged. Play around with these options and you'll see how easy it is to adjust your layouts with just one property. Next up, justify content. Now that we know how to control the direction of our items using flex direction, let's talk about how to space them out along the main axes. That's where the justify content property comes in. Justify content is used to align and distribute your items along the main axes. Whether your main axis is horizontal or vertical, justify content decides how your items are spaced. By default, items are packed at the start of the main axes. This is called flex start. Want to center your items? Use justify content center. To push them to the end, set justify content to flex end. Justify content space between. Spread your items out with equal space between them, but none at the edges. Justify content space around. Adds equal space around each item, including the outer edges. Justify content space evenly ensures equal spacing between every item and the edges. Let's have a look at this in action. Let's now give justify content to this flex container. So right now the main axis is row from the flex direction. So that's going left to right there. So let's go justify content and we'll go flex start. Now if we save that, that is the default setting, so nothing changes. Now if we change this to center, it'll align along the middle. And now flex end will be at the end. Now if we want some space between, go space between. There's space in the middle of each item. Now if we do around, there will be space around each. But if we want it even, we go space evenly. We save that. Let's also have a look at justify content with flex direction column. So flex start is the default. Now if we go center, save that, it's in the center there. Now if we go flex end, that's at the end. Now if we go space around, there's space around, space evenly, space is evenly distributed, space between. Justify content makes it super easy to control the spacing of your items, whether you're centering a navigation bar or distributing cards evenly across a page. Try out these different values to see how they affect your layout. Next up, align items. So we've learned how to align items along the main axes using justify content. But what about the cross axes? That's where align items comes in. Align items controls how your items are positioned along the cross axes. Whether your cross axis is vertical or horizontal, this property lets you align your items relative to it. By default, Flexbox uses align items stretch. This stretches the items to fill the container along the cross axes, as long as their height or width isn't explicitly set. If you want your items to align at the start of the cross axes, use align items flex start. To align items in the center, use align items center. This is great for centering things vertically or horizontally, depending on your layout. For alignment at the end of the cross axes, use Align Items Flex End. And if you want items to align based on their text baselines, you can use Align Items Baseline. Let's have a look at this in action. Let's now use Align Items on this container. So we'll go Align Items, Stretch, which is the default. Nothing happens because the items have a height and width, so they don't stretch. Next, we'll do Flex Start. Save that. Nothing changes there. Then we'll go Center and moves down to the center, and then Flex End to the end. But if we go back to center for a second, Align Item Center, and we do Justify Content Center, this is how we center a div. Align Items gives you control over how your items are positioned along the cross axes. It's perfect for centering, aligning, or stretching items to fit your design. Next up, Align Self. Now we know how to align all the items in a Flex container using Align Items. But what if you need just one item to stand out and have a different alignment? That's where Align Self comes in. Align Self allows you to override the Align Items property for individual items. This means you can control the alignment of a single Flex item along the cross axes, while the others stay aligned as usual. By default, Flex items have Align Self Auto, which means they inherit the alignment from the container's Align Items property. To align just one item at the start of the cross axes, use Align Self Flex Start. Want to center a single item? Use Align Self Center. For alignment, at the end of the cross axes, use Align Self Flex End. And if you want a single item to stretch while others don't, you can set its Align Self to stretch. And just like Align Items, you can use Align Self Baseline to align a single item based on its text baseline. Let's have a look at a live example. Let's now use Align Self on this blue item. So first we're going to go down to the item and go Align Self. And we'll go Flex Start to start with. Save that, and it's moved up to the top there. We can also do Flex End, drops to the bottom, and the last one, Center, where it lines back up there. Align Self is perfect when you need one item to stand out or behave differently from the rest. It's a simple way to add customization without affecting the other items in the container. Next up, we'll look at how to control wrapping in Flexbox using the Flex Wrap property. So far, all the Flex items we've seen stay in one row or column, no matter how many there are or how much space is available. But what if you want your items to wrap onto a new line or column when there's no room left? That's where Flex Wrap comes in. Flex Wrap allows you to control whether your items stay in a single line or wrap onto multiple lines. This is especially useful for layouts with a lot of items or when your container has limited space. By default, Flex Wrap is set to No Wrap, which means all the items will stay in a single line, even if they overflow the container. If you want your items to wrap onto a new line when they run out of space, use Flex Wrap Wrap. This is perfect for creating responsive layouts. Flex Wrap Wrap Reverse works the same as Wrap, but the new line or column will start in the opposite direction. Let's have a look at Flex Wrap in action. Now have a look at Flex Wrap in action. So we'll put Flex Wrap on the container We'll go flex wrap, no wrap. This is the default. We'll save that and nothing changes. Now if we change this to wrap, save that, items go on the new line now. Now if we want to reverse the line, we go wrap, reverse, save that, and it starts from the bottom. Flex wrap is essential for making your layout responsive. It ensures your items don't overflow the container and automatically wrap onto new lines or columns. Next, we'll combine this with flex direction to create a powerful feature called flex flow. We've learned about flex direction to control the main axes and flex wrap to manage how items behave when there is no space. But did you know you can combine these two properties into one? Enter flex flow. Flex flow is a shorthand property that lets you set both flex direction and flex wrap in a single line of code. This can simplify your CSS and make your Flexbox layouts easier to read and manage. The syntax for flex flow is simple. It takes two values. The first is for flex direction, and the second one is for flex wrap. For example, flex flow row wrap means the items will flow in a row and wrap to the next line if needed. You can mix and match these values. For instance, flex flow column wrap makes items flow in a column and wrap vertically. Flex flow row no wrap keeps them in a single row with no wrapping. Let's have a look at flex flow in action. Let's give this container a flex flow. So we'll go flex flow, and we'll say row wrap. Now the items are wrapping in a row. We can also do column wrap. So it goes down and wraps onto the next line. Column no wrap, stays in one line. And row no wrap. Flex flow is a quick and powerful way to manage the layout flow of your items. It combines the power of flex direction and flex wrap into a single property, giving you clean, concise code. In the next section, we'll explore the order property, which allows you to rearrange flex items without changing your HTML structure. By default, Flexbox displays items in the order they appear in the HTML. But what if you want to rearrange items visually without changing your HTML? That's where the order property comes in. Order allows you to change the position of your individual flex items along the main axes. This means you can visually rearrange items without touching the HTML structure, which is super helpful for creating dynamic layouts. By default, all items have an order value of 0. This means they appear in the same order as in the HTML. You can assign a positive or negative number to the order property to move items around. For example, setting order to -1 moves an item to the front, while larger positive numbers push it further back. Here's a practical example. If you want a featured item to always appear first, no matter its position in the HTML, you can use order to make it happen. Let's have a look at a code example. Let's now use the order property on the flex items. So say if I want this number 1 to go to the back, I use order and then a value of 1. Save that. There you have it. The default number for all of them is 0, so anything higher goes to the back. Say if I want number 7 to go to the front, I'll go order, -1, save that, and it goes to the front. Now, say if I wanted this number 2 to go to the back as well, I go order, and then I need it to be higher than number 1, so 2, save that, and it goes to the back. Here are a couple of tips for using order. Items with the same order value are displayed in the order they appear in the HTML. Use order carefully to avoid confusing layouts, especially for accessibility purposes. Order gives you the flexibility to rearrange items visually without altering the structure of your HTML. In the next section, we'll dive into one of the most exciting features of Flexbox, flexibility itself. We'll explore how to use the flex property to control how items grow, shrink, and size themselves. Flexbox isn't just about arranging items. It's also about giving them the flexibility to adapt to available space. That's where the flex property comes in. This is one of the most powerful features of Flexbox. The flex property is a shorthand for controlling how items grow, shrink, and set their base size. This determines how much space each item takes up within the flex container. It combines three sub-properties. Flex grow controls how much an item should grow when there's extra space. Flex shrink controls how much an item should shrink when there's not enough space. Flex basis sets the initial size of the item before growth or shrinkage is applied. By default, the flex property is set to 0, 1, auto. This means items will not grow, but they can shrink, and their size is determined by their content or the flex basis. Flex grow allows items to expand when there's extra space in the container. For example, setting flex grow 1 makes the item grow proportionally to fill the space. Flex shrink determines how much an item shrinks when space is limited. If you set it to 0, the item won't shrink, even if there isn't enough room. Flex basis sets the starting size of an item before growth or shrinkage is applied. For example, setting flex basis 200 pixels ensures the item starts at 200 pixels wide. Instead of setting these properties individually, you can use the flex shorthand. For example, flex 1 is equivalent to flex grow 1, flex shrink 1, flex basis 0. Let's have a look at flex property in action. Let's now use the flex property on the items. So if we add flex 1, if we add all this to each item, they all grow proportionally the same. So if we extend it, they all stay the same size. Now if I add flex 2 to the red, it grows twice as much. Here are some quick tips for using the flex property. Use flex grow to make items expand proportionally when there's extra space. Set flex shrink to control which items shrink more or less when there's not enough room. Use flex basis to define a starting size that fits your layout needs. Combine these values with the shorthand flex for clean and concise code. The flex property is the heart of Flexbox. It gives you the power to make your layouts dynamic and responsive. Wow, look at that! We've covered so much today and unlocked the true power of Flexbox for creating flexible, responsive layouts. Let's quickly recap everything we've learned. First, we tackled the main axes and cross axes, which form the foundation of Flexbox. Then, we used flex direction to control the flow of items. We managed alignment along the main axes with justify content and along the cross axes with align items. For individual control, we explored align self. When working with multi-line layouts, we learned about flex wrap and align content to handle spacing, and wrapping. We also saw how to reorder items visually with the order property. And finally, we adjusted the size of items using Flex Basis, Flex Grow, and Flex Shrink to create layouts that adapt beautifully to different screen sizes. As you can see, Flexbox is incredibly versatile, and now you have all the tools you need to start building amazing, responsive layouts. Remember, practice is key. Experimenting with these properties, try combining them in different ways, and don't be afraid to explore. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you next time. Until then, happy coding.